Are you ready to lose weight and feel better than you've ever felt in your life? I, the Minister of Wellness, am offering an incredible 50% discount code on my Lose 100 Pounds in 100 Days book, which contains the exact meal plan that has helped thousands of our people achieve amazing results. Take advantage before this offer ends by visiting theministerofwellness.com and use the promo code NEWYOU22.
Yes, welcome back to the African Diaspora News channel. My name is Richard Sudan. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, support the platform and spread the word. So there's a story which I wanted us to discuss and chop up today and break down. And it's something which has been bothering me for a while now. We are approaching the 2-year anniversary of the tragic and fatal helicopter crash which killed Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and 7 other souls who were on board the helicopter crash, which took place in California. Now, the news story we need to talk about today is the news that in the lawsuit against LA County, Vanessa Bryant, the wife of Kobe Bryant, and her legal team have produced a filing to the court, which is pretty explosive. Now, a bit of background really is needed before we get into this. So it transpired in the pretty much immediate aftermath of the crash that a number of officers from the LA County Sheriff's Department, deputies, had basically been sharing graphic images of the corpses of Kobe Bryant, Gianna, and the other victims on board. Now, in September of 2020, the initial lawsuit was filed by Vanessa Bryant, and she cited, amongst other things, a violation of civil rights and a violation of privacy. Now, initially her legal team had to fight in the courts for the names of those individuals, officers, law enforcement officers, alleged to have shared these graphic images of the bodies of the victims. They had to fight for the names of those deputies to be released, but those names were released. Now, the court case was still pursued, and recently LA County and LA County's lawyers attempted to have the case thrown out completely. And their argument was that although it was admitted that officers had actually shared the images of Kobe Bryant, Gianna and others amongst themselves, and although these images that have been shared had nothing to do with the case, and that was admitted, the argument from the LA County lawyers was essentially that because the images hadn't gone public and viral, thank God, that, you know, there was no real case to answer to. And I think the wording was, they said that the distress caused was hypothetical, in the sense that because the images hadn't gone public and the images had stayed amongst the officers, there wasn't really a case to answer to. And so the lawyers for LA County attempted to have the case thrown out. Now, recently, a federal judge ruled against this attempt, and the federal judge has said no, the case will go to court, and the court date, I believe, is set for February. Now, there's been yet another development since then. So the sort of argument put forward by the police and the authorities and the lawyers for LA County, the suggestion in the media and the suggestion put forward by them was that although the images had been shared amongst officers, it was just a handful of officers. Maybe one officer had shared it at a bar, but beyond that, the images hadn't been circulated. And apparently, according to an internal investigation, the images had been destroyed, and there were no more images, and there was no possibility of those images coming to light. But lo and behold, we've now learned in a filing which was produced by Vanessa Bryant's lawyers that actually the scandal goes way beyond a handful of a few officers and a few firefighters. We are now learning that at least 28 officers, at least 28 police officers, and it could be more than that, actually shared these images at least a dozen firefighters in bars, and even these images were actually shared in a media awards gala. Now, can you imagine a scenario in which people are really sharing these images amongst themselves in all places at an awards gala? I want you to imagine the kind of context, the kind of conversations, the kinds of individuals that would really share these images amongst themselves. It's a pretty incredible state of affairs. Now, apparently the images have now gone, but apparently now it's transpired and it's been put forward in the filing by Vanessa Bryant's lawyers that actually these officers and individuals made attempts. Not only do we know the images now are suggested to have been shared by many more people than originally thought, it's now suggested that the officers involved covered their tracks and attempted to cover any evidence of wrongdoing. Now, these are really serious charges indeed. So Vanessa Bryant is pressing ahead and seeking damages from Los Angeles County for the invasion of privacy over the sharing of these images. Now, I mean, I'm not going to pretend I wasn't personally a bit emotional and upset about this, because like a lot of you, Kobe Bryant was a hero for me growing up. I was a basketball player in my youth and in my teens and in my 20s. And Kobe Bryant was a few years older than me, and I literally remember when he came into the league, the explosive impact he had, and how he's one of a few handful of players in the Hall of Fame that you could really say changed the dynamics of the game. So of course, this man had an impact across the world, and of course LA went into really a state of mourning when he died. But think a minute about the pain and trauma that Vanessa Bryant and her family and the families of the other victims have gone through, quite apart from the fact, of losing a child, losing a spouse, losing a loved one. There's the double-edged sword of dealing with the complete irresponsibility and vulgarity of the very authorities that are supposed to be protecting the site of the crash for the investigation, protecting the integrity of it, and ultimately, in a way, protecting the sort of mental health and the emotional well-being of the families of those who fatefully died in that horrible crash. Can you imagine, not only you're dealing with the process of grieving, but you've got that added worry that graphic images of the remains of your loved ones could be shared potentially across the internet and the world because of the reckless irresponsibility of a few law enforcement officers or firefighters and anyone else that was really involved in this scandal. And there's another dimension to this for me, and I've been thinking about this for days, because I think we have to be very careful in our opinions and the claims that we make. But I've thought about this a lot, and for me there's no, I would love to know the ethnicity and the background of all of those involved that have allegedly shared these images, and I'll tell you why. Let's assume, let's not make any assumption, but can you imagine a scenario in which the makeup of those sharing the images were predominantly non-black or white or what have you? Because I really can't imagine black people reveling in the sort of sharing of these images. For what purpose would you share these images amongst yourself if not for the purposes of investigation? This is a kind of sick glorification or, a fetishization of black suffering, really. Are these dynamics involved? I guess and I hope those facts will come to light as to the exact nature and motive and the context and the context of the conversations that went on when these people were sharing the images of dead people in all places at a media gala award, as these new court filings are suggesting. And this may very well be just the tip of the lid of Pandora's box, which might be lifted. And I hope that the court proceedings really get to the bottom of this. And if there was an element of these officers and their conversations and the nature of them sharing the images of Kobe Bryant and his daughter and all the others, if there was the nature of the sort of fetishization of gleefully sharing these images of Kobe Bryant, a black man, and relishing in black suffering. You know, I want this to come to light, because let's be honest, in the United States, there's a long history of the you know, sort of enjoyment of black suffering, the fetishization of it. You know, people used to share postcards, you know, of people that had been lynched and murdered, and black people that had been terrorized by white lynch mobs, often with the involvement and complete complicity of law enforcement, etc. And I tell you why. I feel the question about if this was an element of what happened here is important, because there's a long history of entrenched, deep-rooted racism in police forces all across the United States, but also in, you know, people like to present California and Los Angeles in particular, and these kinds of areas in California, as being sort of more enlightened areas of the country. And you know, one of the things that sprung to my mind when I'm looking at the dynamics of this case that Vanessa Bryant is now bringing to Los Angeles County, I remember, and some of you will remember, a year or maybe a bit more ago, when again Los Angeles police officers were found to be sharing a joke meme of George Floyd around Valentine's Day. A sick glorification again of not just black suffering, but one of the sort of one of the more symbolic instances of a black lynching in the United States. You know, the murder of a black person by a police officer, which, you know, there's however many of these cases take place, but this was a case that for whatever reasons caught not just national attention but global attention, and once again focused the attention of not just the world, the United Nations, squarely on the deep-rooted anti-racism and malpractice of the United States police force. And there's also databases of, you know, suspected white supremacists and those who are suspected of being in far-right gangs who are literally serving police officers in Los Angeles. And if I'm correct, and I think this is the case, I think in the case of George Floyd, the LA officer who either created the image of George Floyd, the joke meme mocking his death, and or shared it, I don't think there's been any culpability brought to those responsible. There's been next to no accountability. And so I hope that the court proceedings will get to the bottom of this. I hope that each and every officer, firefighter, and everyone else who are paid by tax dollars of black Americans, I hope each and every one of them are exposed, and I hope there's some real accountability here, because I can't really fathom and imagine the pain that Vanessa Bryant and the other family members of the other victims must have gone through over the last couple of years. It's been 2 years, but for a horrific accident of that nature, it probably feels like the helicopter crash took place yesterday. You know, here we are, we have a case of these graphic images of, you know, victims of a horrible crash, Kobe Bryant, his daughter, 7 other victims, potentially, you know, alleged to have been shared amongst a number of officers. LA County wanted the court dismissed because they said Vanessa Bryant's pain was hypothetical. I think that was the wording, because the images, thank God, hadn't gone public. They wanted the case to be thrown out, and lo and behold, now we're realizing the rabbit hole goes even deeper, and possibly deeper still. And this is disgusting, repulsive behavior by these officers. I always try to play devil's advocate with these cases and look through all the potential instances. But again, and I'll say this, I want to know the sort of, you know, were these officers white? Were they Latino? What was the makeup of the officers and the firefighters sharing these images? Because the answer to that question will lead to inevitable questions about the nature of them sharing these images. Because try to imagine in your head, why the hell would you share these images amongst yourself if not for the purposes of investigation? Some might say, well, you know, it's just curiosity. People share anything on the internet and amongst themselves. But Kobe Bryant was one of the most dominant players in the NBA of his generation, definitely ever. And, you know, why the hell would you share these images amongst yourselves? You know, it's hard to imagine for me a scenario in which these images weren't being reveled in a completely unwholesome and distasteful way. And I really admire the courage and the fortitude of Vanessa Bryant. and the work of her lawyers to really trying to hold these people to account. And I'm glad this case is going ahead in February, and I'm glad the federal judge threw out the attempts of the lawyers to try to diminish the pain that Vanessa Bryant must feel, irrespective of whether or not these images have been shared publicly. That's not really the point. You know, that would be bad enough. That would be bad enough. And I hope to God that doesn't happen. I hope to God these images have been deleted. You know, the officers involved have said to deleted them because they want to cover their tracks. That would be unfathomable. But it's absolutely unacceptable. It's unacceptable that these officers who have behaved in this manner should get off scot-free. They need to face the music. And moreover, my understanding of the legal system of law enforcement in the United States is such that I think judges need to be seen to be handing out very harsh sentences for things like this. And of course there's the other dynamic. You know, someone said to me today, I was talking about this, they said, well, do you think this would have been the case you know, had the celebrity in the helicopter been white? People can send me examples if they want. I haven't found any. I really don't think you'd have police officers who were probably predominantly not black. Yeah, there's a number of officers, dozens of firefighters involved in sharing these images. You know, no one's going to really be able to convince me they were all black, or even you know, even a sizable minority. These officers were not black, and there's no getting away from questioning that dynamic towards the nature of what they were doing, sharing these horrific images of Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and all the other poor victims of that horrible crash, which by the time you see this, we most probably would have marked the 2-year anniversary. So more power to Vanessa Bryant in her pursuit of justice. I hope justice becomes a reality, and I hope it offers her and her family some form of solace, because they've had enough to deal with over the last couple of years. And shame on the LA police, shame on the you know, LA County sheriff deputies that did this. What sick mindset do you have to be in to share these images? It would be bad enough if it's just members of the public doing this, but as a police officer in the United States, there's no excuse for this. They know what the correct thing to do is, but it's almost a cultural norm for people to think that black suffering is funny amongst the United States police force, and we know why. We know where the origins are, and that's why when people call for the police to be defunded, it's not a catchy slogan that people are just saying for the sake of it. The slogan is born of the very real ramifications of the ongoing systemic corruption in the United States police forces all across the country. And in this case, my bet is that these dynamics of racism did come into the sharing of these images, because I can't really fathom a scenario in which these dynamics do not come into play. You tell me what you think in the comments. Let me know. I'll wrap this up for there. I think I've covered all the bases for now, but I will be keeping a close eye on this story, as I'm sure a lot of you will. And let's hope that there's some measure of justice and accountability in this case, and the disgraceful behaviour of the LA County sheriffs, deputies, and also the firefighters, the ones that were involved in this. Let's hope justice sees its course in this instance. But I'm going to wrap that up for there. For now, this is the African Diaspora News channel. My name is Richard Sudan. I appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Colonization never ended in the white supremacist system. And as we see today, the colonization is in the mind. Now, those who have been enslaved and those who have been colonized, we're still dealing with the remnants of that through the colonization of the mind. Pick up my book, 7 Steps to Decolonize the Mind, and we will help deprogram you from the colonization that was put upon you by generations and generations of white supremacy. You can pick it up today on Amazon.com.